Maybe, on a distant morning within your imagination, you open your eyes and find not the deep blue sky, not a familiar roof, not the whispering of trees. In front of you stands a wall of milky white crystal, towering so high it swallows the horizon. It is not made of stone, nor of clouds, but of ice, layers upon layers of ice, stacked in quiet stillness like a silent fortress. The wind slips through the cracks, creating a long, hollow sound, smooth and cold. From somewhere deep within the body of the ice, a faint cracking echoes, slow and heavy, like the breathing of an ancient creature, turning beneath its own weight. The ground beneath your feet trembles now and then, not because of thunder, but because the ice itself begins a movement too subtle to see. If you walk a few steps forward, you find the pale, dry, and hardened ground, as if freshly returned by the ocean after a long retreat. Here the waves are gone, and only the wind remains. Fields of fine stone stretch endlessly into the distance, sparse with traces of trees. At the far edge of that imagination, figures appear, beings that do not belong to our modern age. Herds of woolly mammoths, immense and quiet, their curved tusks drawing arches in the frozen air. Shaggy rhinoceroses with massive shoulders and thick horns plowing through the snow, and behind them, the shadows of predators blending into the silver-gray wind, flickering golden eyes at the edge of the frozen grass, the solid frame of a great cat, the long run of wolves in a pack. It is not a dream, nor a scene from a fantasy movie. It is a real face of the earth, existing in stretches of time so vast that human history would be only a tiny dot at the margin of a page. We call that face the Ice Age, a period not fixed in place, nor constant in degree, but long and powerful enough to reshape the outlines of continents, draw water from the oceans, and carve valleys, rivers, and great lakes. Perhaps, if those ages of ice had never come, the map we know today would look different. Fjords would be shallower, fertile plains thinner, coastlines retreating or advancing in other places. And perhaps we ourselves, the ones breathing quietly through a peaceful night, would have taken a different evolutionary path, slower, more solitary, with fewer stories told around the fire. What makes the Ice Age memorable is not just its cold, but its endurance as a teacher. It does not shout. It does not threaten. It simply repeats each winter after another, each summer a little shorter, each thin layer of snow falling again and again until it becomes ice, forcing every living creature to learn difficult lessons, to grow thicker fur, to store fat, to change migration routes, to alter feeding habits, or to leave the stage entirely. At the same time, ice is also a silent sculptor. It draws long blades down mountain slopes, polishes rock faces, and leaves behind in the plains a lonely boulder like a question. In Scandinavia, U-shaped valleys open like pale blue throats. Across North America, chains of lakes stretch wide like great mirrors of water. And along the coast of Canada, solitary stones lie scattered, like fragments of memory carried by the slow push of time. When we speak of the Ice Age, we often imagine a frozen world locked in stillness. But ice is not asleep without motion. Ice advances, and ice retreats. These long breaths of the planet, sometimes deep, sometimes shallow, shift coastlines out and back again, turn forests into grasslands, then one day make them rise thick as walls, push species outward, then draw them back into shelter. In each of these vast cycles, life fumbles its way to endure a little longer. Failure disappears. Success passes on quiet wisdom. When to move, which path avoids the wind, where water can still be found when the land is sealed in frost. And upon this immense stage, humanity appears, a small flicker of fire in the night. No claws, no thick fur, no great speed. But they have fire. They have stones that spark under their hands, shaping into sharp points, thin edges, and small blades. They know to stand closer when the wind grows fierce, to share work, to tell stories to ease the weight of long, hungry months. On the walls of caves warmed by smoke, black charcoal lines of horses, of a human hand, of bison herds speak for their fear, their gratitude, and their hopes for a good hunt. In the sound of the wind and the dry crack of burning wood lie the earliest seeds of art, of memory, of community. Tonight, when you think of ice, you may stand in your mind at the edge of a glacier, moving very slowly. From within, the faint sobbing of melting water becomes small streams that burrow through the belly of the ice. On the surface, the midday light is thin as a veil of milk. Everything feels restrained, without a single wasted motion. The world seems to have been taught to speak softly, to step gently, to listen. Up close, the cold feels absolute. But if you widen your gaze over the long turn of time, you know the wall will retreat, like a tide. It will leave behind valleys so beautiful that future humans will come to gaze upon them, lakes where boats will glide, and plains of rock dust that will feed wheat, barley, potatoes, and corn. Ice is a trial, but ice is also a beginning. Perhaps the most important feeling this opening chapter wishes to place in your heart is a sense of rhythm. Ice comes, ice goes, the wind rises, then stills. Each time the ice arrives, the planet pulls a heavy blanket over itself, sleeping deeper, slower. Each time the ice recedes, grass grows, water runs, and birds reopen their songs. From these rhythms, the land takes its shape, animals change their nature, and humans learn to stand together, to call each other by name. To teach their children to make fire and tell stories of their journey. Ice is not an enemy to defeat, but a long-staying guest that humankind must learn to live with. Why does ice come and go? Perhaps the answer lies in the planet's orbit, in tiny changes of tilt, of distance, of rhythm, small, silent numbers with the power to open and close entire ages. But that is a story for later, where we will move slowly through each mechanism, as if opening an ancient clock and watching its gears interlock with patient precision. For now, let your mind stand still at the edge of the ice wall. Listen to the wind, smell the dry cold. Look at the long scratches carved into the rock by the passing of ice. Think of the things preserved by ice, the things erased by ice, and the things that could only bloom because of ice. Then, very softly, place a question in your heart. If the Ice Age were a thick book, how was its first page turned? What gentle force brushed against the paper's edge, lifting it from the rest and letting it begin its slow passage through time? We will go in search of that answer, in the calm of a quiet voice, where every small detail rests in its place, unhurried, unburdened. To understand why the Earth, once so full of light, has tilted again and again, just enough for the cold to step in and stay long enough to change everything. When you close your eyes, the wall of ice still stands there, tall, white, and wordless. Yet that silence itself is an invitation. It invites us to look deeper into the rhythm of the planet. It invites us to listen to the hidden clockwork of orbit, of tilt, of seasons. It invites us to step into the next part of the story, where causes begin to take shape like small points of light in the dark. And we will begin with the tiniest movements of all. From the faintest tremors of Earth's orbit, a new age slowly began to unfold. There were no explosions, no sharp line dividing before and after. There was only cold, deeper each year, longer each season. And then one day, the world awoke in another shape. Vast glaciers began to expand, like colossal beings sliding out from mountain peaks, silently claiming the plains below. If we could have looked down at the Earth from above back then, the map would be almost unrecognizable. In North America, the entire northern half of the continent lay beneath an ice blanket several kilometers thick, around 2 miles, or about 3 kilometers. Across Europe, ice flowed from Scandinavia down to Germany and Poland, swallowing forests, fields, and valleys. On the other side of the planet, Antarctica, the Andes. and the southern lands of Australia were all buried beneath frozen sheets. The earth seemed to pull itself inward, draped in a heavy white coat that reflected the pale light of the sun. As the ice expanded, the oceans receded. When trillions of tons of water were locked within the glaciers, sea levels dropped by more than 330 feet, or about 100 meters. New lands emerged from the seafloor, natural bridges connecting continents. In the north, the shallow sea between Siberia and Alaska became Beringia, a vast landmass linking Asia and the Americas. In Europe, the North Sea drained to reveal Doggerland, once connecting the British Isles with the mainland, and farther south, where Indonesia and Vietnam are today, the islands fused into a great land known as Sundaland, a bridge for the grand migrations of animals and early humans. Yet this new world, though larger, was brutally harsh. The sky was not the clear blue we know. It was hazy, filled with fine dust and volcanic ash. Winds swept endlessly across barren plains, carrying swirls of icy powder that formed a gray mist. Sunlight filtered weakly through it, dim and distant. The ground, frozen year-round, grew brittle and dry, stripped of the moisture of rain. If you were standing in North America at that time, the view before you would be both magnificent and terrifying. In the distance, a colossal wall of ice rose against the horizon, thousands of meters high, glinting silver white. When the wind blew, the surface of the ice trembled and groaned, like the deep sigh of a sleeping giant. Beneath your feet, the earth and stone were crushed and dragged, leaving long scars, finger marks of the ice across the skin of the planet. In Europe, ancient rivers were blocked, their waters redirected into newborn lakes. Deep valleys were carved into perfect U-shapes, smooth, enormous cuts that still remain visible tens of thousands of years later. In places untouched by the ice, winds blew day and night over the cold, dry steppe, spreading fine glacial dust that settled like gray powder over the ground. The cold slowed the pulse of the planet. Rain fell less often. Evaporation weakened, and the cycle of weather grew heavy and sluggish. Snowstorms could last for weeks, burying everything under layers so deep that the very idea of seasons seemed to fade away. Summer, if one could still call it that, was only a dim and fleeting moment of light, a few misty weeks that could not melt the old snow. And so, the ice grew thicker still. Yet even in this desolate world, there were moments of wonder. When sunlight pierced the clouds at a low angle, it shattered into shimmering streaks across the surface of the ice, like candles flickering inside a crystal palace. Beneath the glaciers, water trickled quietly, forming hidden rivers that carved narrow channels, leaving behind deep blue caves once the ice retreated. If you stood at the edge of a glacier then, you could hear the music of the Ice Age, the slow crack of splitting ice, the soft dripping of water, the whistle of wind through stone, sometimes the muffled thunder of a collapsing ice block. Every sound lingered longer. Stretched thin in the frozen air, the entire world seemed to breathe to the slow rhythm of a colossal heart made of ice. But even in that seemingly lifeless cold, life did not disappear. Along the edges of the glaciers, where winds eased and the ground peeked through, a vast steppe began to form. There, life found its balance again, learning to survive at the border between ice and earth. Hardy grasses, small shrubs, and cold-tolerant plants grew sparsely, but enough to feed great herds of enormous animals. We will go there soon, to the steppe of mammoths and magnificent creatures. But before we step into that land, pause for a moment and listen to the sound of the planet carving itself. For it was in this time of spreading ice that the earth etched scars and lines into its surface, marks that still remain. Even long after the ice is gone, the clear blue lakes of Switzerland, the curved valleys of Norway, the lonely boulders scattered across the plains of Canada, all are the handwriting of ice, the cold poetry written in the language of time. Each glacier was a pen, and the earth itself its endless page. And as that page neared completion, another image began to appear. Between the frozen plains and the gray dust, life not only endured, it flourished. A world of giant beasts stretching from Europe to the Americas, the mammoth steppe, was about to awaken. The frozen world of that age was like a long dream. Sunlight did not vanish completely, yet it had faded so much that it felt more like a memory than a presence. When the sun rose, what touched the ground was not warmth, but a pale, silver light, drifting through a haze of fine dust as thick as smoke. The entire sky wore the color of ash, heavy, cold, and dim. Where did that dust come from? From the very machines of ice the planet had built. As glaciers crept forward, they scraped the surface of the earth, grinding mountains into fine powder and lifting those tiny grains into the air. The wind carried them endlessly, across the steppe, across faraway lands, even across oceans. Mixed with volcanic ash from great eruptions, the dust formed an immense veil that filtered sunlight and wrapped the world in quiet grayness. The winds rarely stopped. They swept across frozen plains day and night, dragging with them snow and dust. There were no forests to block them, no mountains tall enough to break their flow. Each gust was like an ancient song of the planet, long, deep, and without an end. On the ground, winter stretched as if it would never end. Snow fell layer upon layer, burying every trace of the brief summer. Summer itself became little more than a faint breath of light, weak and cold, unable to melt the ice that lay several yards deep, around 10 feet, or about 3 meters. And so the ice continued to build. Each year added another layer, another white cloak draped over the body of the planet. Beyond the frozen core in the lands still free from total ice, a new kind of landscape appeared, the cold steppe. It was not a forest, nor a desert, but a world between two extremes. There the grass grew low, the shrubs sparse, and the ground beneath was locked in permafrost, frozen solid, just under a thin, fragile skin of soil. In winter, the wind screamed across the bare fields. In summer, the grass turned pale gold in the cold sunlight, trembling softly with the rhythm of the breeze. If you could stand there, in the middle of an ice age sunset, you would see a world coated in silver. The sunlight, thin as a thread, slanted across enormous walls of ice. Each beam scattered into thousands of tiny reflections, lighting the horizon like a sea of crystal. In the distance, low gray clouds drifted slowly, mingling with mist rising from melting water. The air carried no sound but the wind. And in that landscape that seemed lifeless, life found a way to continue. Cold-tolerant grasses rooted themselves into the hard soil, using the wind, rather than bees or butterflies, to spread their seeds. Small, hardy shrubs grew scattered across the land, giving shelter to tiny creatures, and upon that ground, giant shadows began to appear, animals born to live with the ice, enduring cold, hunger, and wind. But it was not only plants and animals that learned to adapt. The earth itself began to change its rhythm. Ocean currents, blocked by glaciers, found new paths to flow. Winds shifted direction. The climate rearranged its own design. The planet seemed to be learning a slower way of breathing, conserving energy, accepting silence, embracing stillness. If you stood at the edge of a glacier, before you would unfold a scene unlike any other in the universe. Massive blocks of ice cracked slowly, sending deep rumbles through the ground. Between the crevices, streams of meltwater glowed pale blue, so cold that even light seemed to shiver as it passed through. Where the ice met rock, the stone was polished smooth as glass. Every meter the glacier moved, every 3 feet or so was another stroke of nature's chisel, carving valleys, lakes, and solitary boulders across the land. On rare, clear days, sunlight poured down and transformed everything. The ice reflected light in every direction, making the land seem to shine from within. All was silent, except for the soft dripping of water, like the slow heartbeat of a planet asleep. And within that sleep, life still breathed. In the frozen valleys, between the edges of ice and open ground, a new realm of life was forming. A special world known as the mammoth steppe. There, even in the bitter cold, grass still grew, herds still moved, and the wind still carried the scent of life. When you picture that scene, feel its rhythm, unhurried, undramatic, as calm as breathing in a deep dream. For the Ice Age was not merely an age of cold. It was a low, steady note in the long symphony of the planet, a moment when life stepped back to listen to its own heartbeat. And now, as we leave the walls of ice behind and look toward the distance, toward plains that stretch beyond the horizon, we will step into a world of grass, wind, and giants. A world both harsh and sacred, the mammoth steppe, the land of the great ones. When ice covered nearly half the planet, one might think that life had shrunk into tiny corners, waiting to be erased. But nature, in its quiet brilliance, always finds a crack to slip through. Between the frozen edges of glaciers and the unending sweep of wind, a strange land emerged. Not quite dead, not fully alive, but balanced delicately between two extremes. It was the mammoth steppe. Imagine a vast plain stretching to the horizon, linking Western Europe through Siberia, crossing the Bering Land Bridge into Alaska, and reaching deep into the heart of North America. A colossal carpet of land without forests, without swamps, only dry earth, grass, and wind. Upon that surface, life moved in silence. There was no lush green of tropical jungles, only the pale gray and gold of cold-resistant grass. There were no bright songs of birds, only the long, slow breath of wind. And yet, here, millions of giant creatures lived, walked, and left their footprints on both the snow and the story of the earth. The soil of the mammoth steppe was mysteriously rich. As glaciers moved, they ground rock into fine mineral dust, spreading it across the plains. Rain was rare, but each drop sank deep, trapped within the frozen layer below. Grasses and low shrubs grew together, their roots weaving thickly through the earth, creating abundant food for the giants. Beneath a sky of silver gray, life continued, slowly, patiently, but persistently. Woolly mammoths appeared first, gentle giants wrapped in fur nearly 3 feet thick, or about 1 meter, shielding bodies that could weigh up to 13,000 pounds, or around 6 tons. Beneath that fur lay a dense layer of fat that kept them warm and stored energy through endless winters. Even their blood was special. Red cells shaped to carry oxygen efficiently in freezing temperatures. Each step of a mammoth echoed deep through the ground, steady and rhythmic, like the distant drumbeat of the planet itself. When they moved in herds, the entire steppe seemed to tremble. Snow exploded beneath their feet, and their warm breath rose in clouds of mist. Each one could live for 60 years, enduring thousands of winters, watching the land change color as the ice advanced and retreated. These creatures were more than animals. They were walking memories of an age. Beside them roamed the woolly rhinoceroses, silent warriors of the frozen world. Smaller than mammoths, but no less striking, they bore long, curved horns like blades of crescent moon. They used them to scrape snow in search of food, and sometimes to defend themselves. Ice dust clung to their thick coats, turning them ghostly white as if sculpted from the cold world they lived in, half creature, half statue of frost. Across the plains, ancient bison moved in herds of thousands, dark and shaggy, sweeping across the horizon like waves of living earth. When they ran, the ground shook softly, snow lifted into the air, and the plain itself seemed alive. These herds were the heartbeat of the steppe, the lifeline for predators and for the first humans who wandered there. Among them galloped wild horses, small, sturdy, and covered in dense fur. They dashed through the cold wind, pawed through snow to find grass, gave birth during the brief glow of summer light, and kept moving. Always moving. Farther south, where the ice reached less often, lived stranger beings, the giant ground sloths, towering nearly 20 feet tall, or about 6 meters when standing upright. slow, silent, like walking trees. From afar, the scene was both a tragedy and a miracle. Cold, hunger, and harshness should have erased all life, but instead, they forged every creature into something stronger, wiser, and more efficient. On the mammoth steppe, weakness had no place, but neither did senseless aggression. Every being learned patience, to move slowly, eat little, and quietly wait for change. As dusk fell over the steppe, the pale red sun glowed through layers of dust, lighting the thick fur of the animals. Their breath turned into clouds of white vapor, fading into the air like smoke from ancient fires. The wind whispered across the snow. The crunch of hooves on frozen soil, the low rumble of mammoths, all blended into a slow, heavy, mournful symphony. And yet, even in that silence, watchers waited, learning, planning, enduring. Hidden in the shadows, their golden eyes gleaming, prowled the greatest predators of the Ice Age: saber-toothed cats, cave lions, short-faced bears, and giant wolves. The frozen world was not only the realm of gentle grazers, but also of hunters, silent and patient, keeping the balance of life. There, the circle of survival turned endlessly, a fragile rhythm between life and death. Grass fed the herds fed the hunters, and the hunters in death returned their bones to the soil, feeding the grass once more. In the cold stillness, life never stopped. It moved quietly, steadily, like the breathing of the planet itself. When night finally fell, you could imagine yourself standing upon that steppe, a world untouched by human noise, filled only with the sound of wind and the breath of living things. Above you stretched a pale, dusted sky. Beneath your feet, frozen earth, and between them, the slow, persistent pulse of life. Here, the Ice Age was no longer just a geological chapter. It became a living lesson in resilience. For even within the heart of ice, life found a way to bloom, whether in a single blade of grass, a trembling breath, or a giant footprint in the snow. And where life breathes, predators are never far behind. In the next part, we will follow them into the cold night, the saber-toothed cats, the cave lions, and the towering bears, the true spirits of the Ice Age. As the sun sank beyond the frozen horizon, the world slipped into a dim violet light, soft and misty like breath. The wind eased, snow drifted down like silver dust, and for a moment, silence covered the vast mammoth steppe. But it was only an illusion, for when night fell, another story began. The tale of the hunters of darkness, creatures born to survive hunger and cold. In that shadowed stillness, the first glint of eyes belonged to the saber-toothed cat, Smilodon. A massive feline with curved canines as long as knives, up to 8 inches, or about 20 centimeters, sharp enough to pierce the thick hide of a bison or a young mammoth with a single strike. It was not as fast as a modern lion or cheetah, but it was the perfect ambush predator. The saber-tooth did not chase. It waited, hidden among the rocks and snow, where the pale light could not reach. When the moment came, it lunged forward like an arrow, sinking its fangs into the throat or belly of its prey, ending everything in silence. You might think such a world was cruel, yet in every leap and every breath lay an ancient order, the balance of life. Without predators, herds would overrun the plains. Without prey, hunters would starve. In the cold symmetry of the Ice Age, everything survived by the measure of restraint. Not far away, another giant shadow moved, the short-faced bear, Arctodus simus. When it stood upright, it could reach over 13 feet tall, or about 4 meters, high enough to look across a wall of ice. It was not only a hunter, but a master scavenger. At the faintest scent of a kill left by the saber-tooth, it would arrive to claim it without hesitation. Weighing nearly 2,000 pounds, or about 1 metric ton, and able to run 30 miles per hour, or about 50 kilometers per hour, nothing dared to challenge it. When the short-faced bear walked, the earth gave a low, trembling drumbeat beneath its feet. Far across the northern plains, the cave lion, Panthera spelaea, prowled through sparse forests. Larger than today's African lions, with thick coats and golden eyes reflecting the moonlight, they did not roar like their descendants. They moved like shadows. On the walls of ancient caves in France and Spain, humans painted them. Round heads, white fangs, sharp eyes. Perhaps memories of the deepest fear our ancestors ever knew. Across the frozen fields of North America, the dire wolves moved in packs. They were not the fastest nor the stealthiest, but they possessed what no other predator had: unity. Together, they could bring down a young mammoth after hours of pursuit, taking turns to bite, withdraw, and strike again. Each bite alone was not fatal, but together they bled their prey until it weakened, slowed, and finally fell in silence. When the giant collapsed, the pack lifted their heads and howled, not a cry of victory, but the primal chorus of survival, echoing through the icy plains. In those times, the night was never truly quiet. It was an hour of contrasts, death and life woven together, fear and pride intertwined. Every sound carried the soul of the Ice Age, the hiss of the wind, the crack of shifting ice, the breath of beasts, the distant cry fading into the white void. And among all these mighty creatures, another species watched, quietly, patiently. They were not fast. They were not strong. They had no claws or fangs, but they possessed something no other animal had ever held: a mind that could imagine. These beings built fires in the dark, shaped stone into tools, shared food, warmth, and thought. While bears, lions, and saber-toothed survived through strength, they learned to survive through ideas. They were the early humans, small against the cold, yet carrying within them a flame that would one day change the world. And as the frozen earth continued to test every living thing, it was they, the fragile creatures with hands and minds, who would become the next storytellers of the Ice Age. From afar, the scene was both a tragedy and a miracle. Cold, hunger, and harshness should have erased all life. But instead, they forged every creature into something stronger, wiser, and more efficient. On the mammoth steppe, weakness had no place, but neither did senseless aggression. Every being learned patience, to move slowly, eat little, and quietly wait for change. As dusk fell over the steppe, the pale red sun glowed through layers of dust, lighting the thick fur of the animals. Their breath turned into clouds of white vapor, fading into the air like smoke from ancient fires. The wind whispered across the snow. The crunch of hooves on frozen soil, the low rumble of mammoths, all blended into a slow, heavy, mournful symphony. And yet, even in that silence, watchers waited, learning, planning, enduring. Hidden in the shadows, their golden eyes gleaming, prowled the greatest predators of the Ice Age: saber-toothed cats, cave lions, short-faced bears, and giant wolves. The frozen world was not only the realm of gentle grazers, but also of hunters, silent and patient, keeping the balance of life. There, the circle of survival turned endlessly, a fragile rhythm between life and death. Grass fed the herds fed the hunters, and the hunters, in death, returned their bones to the soil, feeding the grass once more. In the cold stillness, life never stopped. It moved quietly, steadily, like the breathing of the planet itself. When night finally fell, you could imagine yourself standing upon that steppe, a world untouched by human noise, filled only with the sound of wind and the breath of living things. Above you stretched a pale, dusted sky, beneath your feet, frozen earth, and between them, the slow, persistent pulse of life. Here, the Ice Age was no longer just a geological chapter. It became a living lesson in resilience, for even within the heart of ice, life found a way to bloom, whether in a single blade of grass, a trembling breath, or a giant footprint in the snow. And where life breathes, predators are never far behind. In the next part, we will follow them into the cold night, the saber-toothed cats, the cave lions, and the towering bears, the true spirits of the Ice Age. If you could look at Earth from afar during that time, you would see that our blue planet was never still. It breathed, slowly, deeply, its rhythm echoing like the heartbeat of the cosmos. One breath might last tens of thousands of years. A single blink of its climate could hold the entire history of a species. The Ice Age was never a frozen block of silence. It swayed, like a colossal pendulum between cold and warmth. When the ice advanced, sea levels dropped, continents stretched outward, and the steppes expanded. When the ice retreated, the oceans rose, forests returned, and life changed its colors. These cycles, known by scientists as glacial and interglacial periods, repeated again and again, each one a verse in the long song of the Earth. The cause of this rhythm was not far away. It lay in the very orbit of the planet itself. Hundreds of thousands of years ago, the Serbian mathematician Milankovitch discovered that three subtle movements, orbital eccentricity, axial tilt, and the slow wobble of the planet's spin, together composed the great symphony of climate. Each tiny shift, even by a fraction, changed how much sunlight reached Earth, tilting the balance between warmth and cold. When the Earth's axis tilted less, closer to 22 degrees instead of 24.5, summers in the northern hemisphere grew cooler. The winter snow no longer melted completely. Year after year, fresh layers built atop the old, and sunlight reflected off the white surface, sending energy back into space. The planet absorbed less heat, and the glaciers spread. When Earth's orbit stretched into a longer ellipse, it drifted farther from the sun during part of the year, making winters colder and summers shorter. Bit by bit, flake by flake, the cold assembled into a vast machine of ice. Then, at some point, the planet leaned the other way. Sunlight grew stronger, ice began to melt, ocean currents shifted, winds carried warmth from the equator toward the poles, and the world stirred awake. Forests spread, grasslands faded, animals migrated, and humankind found new fertile lands waiting beneath the thaw. But the rhythm was not always gentle. There were moments when the climate changed abruptly, as if the planet itself gasped. One of those sudden moments came about 12,000 years ago. We call it the Younger Dryas. Before it, the Earth was warming. Glaciers were retreating, forests were returning, and life seemed ready for a new age. Then, without warning, the cold came back. In just a few decades, global temperatures plummeted, glaciers stopped melting, winters returned with double their former strength. Scientists now believe that a massive flood of fresh water from Lake Agassiz in North America poured into the Atlantic Ocean, disrupting the Gulf Stream, the great current that carries heat across the planet. The people who lived through it could not have known why. They only felt summers grow shorter, skies grayer, snow heavier. They built larger fires, hunted farther, and hid deeper within caves. In the faint glow of embers, they might have told one another that the spirit of ice had returned. Perhaps to them, the Ice Age had never truly ended. The Younger Dryas lasted nearly 1,000 years, a millennium that tested the endurance of life and the will of humankind. Yet when it finally ended, the Earth began to warm once more. Ice melted, slowly but surely. The seas rose, forests expanded, and from that melting ice, a new world was born, the world we live in today. When scientists drill deep into the ice cores of Greenland and Antarctica, they uncover layers of frozen time. Each thin sheet holds tiny air bubbles, unchanged pockets of atmosphere from hundreds of thousands of years ago. Each layer is a diary page of the Earth, recording carbon, oxygen, and ancient temperature. From them, we learn that the climate has never been still. It has always moved, always tested life. These cycles of cold and warmth shaped more than landscapes. They shaped resilience. They trained life itself, especially humanity, to adapt, to invent, to wander. Without such change, perhaps we would never have learned to think, to migrate, to survive beyond our limits. The Ice Age, with its fierce freezes and slow thaws, was humanity's first great classroom. A school with no chalkboards, only snow and wind, no teachers, only nature. And its first lesson was simple yet eternal. Everything changes, and only adaptation endures. In the next part, as the ice begins to retreat, the planet will enter one of its greatest transformations. The moment when the great thaw begins, and the warm world we know takes its first breath. After tens of thousands of years of rule, the reign of ice began to fade. There were no thunderclaps, no explosions, only the slow, patient, and absolute act of melting. Each day, as the low sun filtered through gray clouds, billions of tiny droplets streamed down from the great body of the glaciers. Streams became rivers, rivers became waterfalls, and waterfalls became seas. It was the moment the planet awakened from a sleep that had lasted for millennia. Imagine that scene. A morning 15,000 years ago, standing where the central plains of North America are today. Before you rises a wall of ice several thousand meters high, towering miles into the sky. Then, a deep crack echoes through the air like the breath of the earth itself. A thunderous roar follows as the wall breaks apart, releasing a flood so vast it seems like the anger of time unleashed. These were the first great floods of the modern Earth. When massive glacial lakes such as Lake Agassiz and Lake Missoula burst their icy dams, trillions of tons of water cascaded across the plains, tearing through forests, rock, and soil, carrying even boulders the size of houses. The torrents raged for days, carving deep valleys, gorges, and wide alluvial plains, the same landscapes we still see today across Canada and the northwestern United States. In Europe, the great rivers, the Rhine, the Danube, and the Volga, were born from these melting flows. The U-shaped valleys of Switzerland, Norway, and Iceland, where people now travel to admire their beauty, were once the paths of colossal rivers of ice. When the glaciers withdrew, they did not just leave marks, they created the world itself. As the ice retreated from North America and Northern Europe, the land emerged bare and desolate. No trees, no grass, only mud, rock, and sand. Yet within a few centuries, the first seeds, carried by wind and birds, began to sprout. Grass, moss, then shrubs. Soon, pine forests and oak groves spread across the continents. The planet shifted from the silver white of ice to the tender green of life. With that change came rising seas, the land bridges that once connected continents, Beringia between Siberia and Alaska, Doggerland between Britain and Europe, and Sundaland in Southeast Asia, sank beneath the waves. New islands, bays, and coastlines emerged. The map of the Earth slowly began to take the shape we know today. But geography was not the only thing that changed. Life itself transformed. As the mammoth steppe disappeared, the giants that had ruled it grew lost. Mammoths, woolly rhinoceroses, ancient bison, saber-toothed cats, all were creatures of the cold and the dry. Now, as forests returned, they had nowhere to roam, nothing left to eat. One by one, they weakened and vanished, quietly, slowly, as they had once arrived. Meanwhile, the smallest of all creatures, humankind, adapted the fastest. As the ice melted, they followed the rivers, migrating to new lands. They learned to farm the fertile soil left behind by the glaciers, to hunt smaller animals instead of great beasts, and to build stable communities. In Mesopotamia, along the Nile, and beside the Yellow River, the first seeds of agriculture were sown. The ice had gone, but its legacy remained in every river, every field, every valley. It had carved the planet with patience and left behind its greatest gift, the fertile ground on which life could continue. From afar, seen through the eyes of time, the earth seemed to be rewriting itself. Rivers redrew the map. Forests spread outward like green waves. Small groups of humans walked along the banks, building homes of mud and grass. A new world was forming, rising gently from the remnants of the frozen one. And perhaps, in the soft murmur of the melting streams, the planet was whispering, "I have slept long enough. It is time to live again." Yet even in that beautiful rebirth, a quiet tragedy lingered. For as the new world emerged, the old one had to pass away. The giants of the Ice Age, the creatures that once made the ground tremble beneath their steps, were about to face their final chapter. Across a world where wind howled through frozen plains, where every creature wore thick fur to survive the cold, there was one species that had nothing. No claws, no armor, no warmth, except bare hands, a curious mind, and a miracle: fire. Imagine a night in the middle of the Ice Age. The wind roars through the mountain passes, cold enough to freeze breath itself. Snow piles high at the cave's entrance. And in that darkness, a small group huddles close around a fragile flame. The fire is not large, yet its faint orange glow dances on the rock walls, flickering across faces that watch in silence. Amid the endless wind, the crackle of burning wood becomes the warmest sound on earth. That fire did more than give warmth. It became a symbol of life. It kept beasts away, dried animal hides, softened meat, and turned scarce food into nourishment. It gave the gift of time, hours to rest, to speak, to dream beneath the trembling light. With fire, humankind separated itself from the night. Stone and bone became their allies. Sharp flakes of flint were shaped into spears, blades, and axes. Each small shard fitted to a wooden shaft, turning simple sticks into powerful tools. These replaced the claws nature never gave them, transforming gentle hands into weapons. With them, early humans could bring down great beasts, carve their meat, strip their hides, and use every part: the bones as shelter frames, the sinews as bowstrings, the fat as oil for lamps. Out on the frozen plains, they learned a deeper truth. Strength alone was never enough. True power came from intelligence, from cooperation. A single hunter could not bring down a mammoth or an ancient bison. But together, with plans, with traps, with spears thrown from afar, they could make even a giant fall. Each hunt was not just survival, it was ritual. When a mammoth collapsed, the group gathered around it. There were no loud cheers, only quiet breaths, part joy, part reverence. They knew this death would keep them alive for many days. Its hide would become roofs, its bones the walls of homes, its fat the light for long nights. Nothing was wasted. In a world of ice, respect was as vital as strength. And in those long, endless nights, as blizzards howled outside, humans began to paint. On the damp cave walls, they used charcoal, ochre, and minerals to capture the world around them. The mammoth, the bison, the wild horse, the cave lion, alive and powerful, like the breath of life preserved in color. Perhaps they painted to remember, perhaps to hope, or perhaps simply to tell the story, to keep the memory of existence alive. Those paintings, found tens of thousands of years later, became humanity's first voice to the universe. They spoke of fear, of gratitude, of longing to endure, and maybe they were a way to find peace within the cold. As time passed, their skills grew finer. Arrows appeared. Bows made of animal sinew let them hunt from afar, reducing danger. They learned to preserve meat with smoke, to build shelters from bones, and to travel farther, crossing the frozen lands in search of new horizons. When sea levels dropped, land bridges emerged. Beringia, linking Siberia and Alaska. Doggerland, between Britain and Europe, and Sundaland, across Southeast Asia. Along these routes, our ancestors walked into the world. And then, amid snowstorms and icy winds, humans did something extraordinary. They imagined. They carved small figures of women from stone and bone, the Venus figurines, rounded, fertile, full of life. Perhaps they symbolized birth, hope, or the sacred rhythm of existence within the frozen world. These figurines, these paintings, these stone tools, they are proof that while ice ruled the earth, the fire of humankind still burned bright. They had not yet built cities, nor written words, but they had created something greater, the awareness of themselves. They knew they existed. They knew the world was vast and cold, but that within the darkness, there was still a place of warmth, a circle of firelight where they gathered, telling the story of today, so they would not forget who they were. As the firelight flickered upon cave walls, the shadows of humans and mammoths danced together, two destinies intertwined in an ancient rhythm. The Ice Age had shaped them with cold, but from that same cold, the first spark of civilization was born, from a small flame in a stone cave on a stormy night of ice and wind. As the ice withdrew and the world turned green again, for many creatures it was not salvation, it was farewell. The giants that had ruled the frozen plains, the survivors of 1,000 winters, now faced a new enemy, warmth. Across the lands that had once been the mammoth steppe, the dry grass disappeared, replaced by forests. The ground softened, the air grew damp, and dense vegetation blocked the paths where the great beasts once roamed. The woolly mammoths, born for open horizons and dry wind, became lost among the trees. Their vast herds, once walking dozens of miles each day, about 50 kilometers, found themselves trapped between young forests. They starved slowly or became isolated in shrinking pockets of land, echoes fading from a vanishing age. A few mammoths found a final refuge on Wrangel Island in the Arctic Ocean, where the ice lingered longer than on the mainland. There, a small population, perhaps only a few hundred, survived, shrinking in size, enduring for a few thousand more years. By the time the Great Pyramid of Giza rose in Egypt, around 4,000 years ago, those last mammoths were still breathing beneath the northern sky. While humans were writing, farming, and measuring the stars, a handful of shaggy giants still lifted their trunks to trumpet weakly into the Arctic mist. But they were not alone in their fall. The woolly rhinoceros, once stubborn and strong, vanished as the forests spread. The saber-toothed cats, deprived of their massive prey, could not adapt to the smaller, swifter animals. The short-faced bear, the giant ground sloth, and the ancient bison, one by one, they too stepped off the stage of the world. Why did they disappear? Scientists have debated for decades. Some say the warming climate changed too quickly, food vanished, habitats shifted, and the great beasts could not adjust. Others point to another cause: us. As the ice receded, humans spread across the planet. They carried spears, bows, and tactics born of cooperation. A few dozen hunters working together could bring down a 6-ton creature, about 5.5 metric tons. They hunted not only for meat, but for hides, bones, and fat, the necessities of survival. But humans were unlike any other predator. They hunted efficiently, relentlessly. They killed not only the weak, but the strong, the leaders of herds, the parents of generations. In just a few centuries, a blink in geological time, the giants were gone. Perhaps on one of the final evenings of the Ice Age, somewhere on a Siberian plain, a group of hunters sat beside their fire, roasting meat, unaware that the smoke curling into the sky was the farewell smoke of an entire era. In the distance, an old mammoth watched the rising firelight, its cloudy eyes reflecting the flicker of orange. It did not know why its kin were vanishing, nor why the air smelled of man. And one day, it fell, not to storm or frost, but to a single sharp stone-tipped spear. Its final cry echoed through the wind, fading into the cold air, a sound marking the end of a reign that had lasted millions of years. When the last of the great beasts were gone, the world changed its voice. The heavy footsteps, the deep bellows, the trembling of the ground, gone. The forests spread, birds sang more brightly. Yet beneath that new music was an emptiness that lingered. The earth felt smaller, quieter, as if the planet itself bowed its head to mourn its first children of ice. Yet their disappearance was not meaningless. From the ashes of the giants, humankind learned something profound about itself. We learned that strength can feed life, but it can also destroy it. That our planet is not infinite, and that every creature, no matter how mighty, depends on the fragile balance of nature. The skeletons of mammoths, woolly rhinos, and saber-toothed cats now rest in the frozen soil, not just as fossils, but as reminders. They whisper that life never conquers nature. It only lives alongside it, until the day that lesson is forgotten again. When the final ice melted away, the earth wore a full coat of green. Yet deep beneath the ground, where ancient frost still sleeps, the breath of that age remains, cold, magnificent, and sorrowful, like a dream long past. For the Ice Age may have ended, but its memory endures, in every valley, every lake, and in the DNA of us all, the descendants of those who walked through ice and fire. Though the glaciers have long retreated, their breath still lingers across the earth. Like the final notes of a song that has ended, the echoes of the Ice Age continue to hum through every valley, every drop of water, every grain of soil. If you walk today along mountain ranges and look down upon deep, uneven blue lakes, you are gazing upon the very paths once carved by ice. In northern Europe, vast U-shaped valleys still hold the shape of ancient glaciers. In Canada, thousands of crystal-clear lakes stretch across the land like a string of jewels, footprints left behind by the mighty Laurentide ice sheet. And scattered across open plains, you may find enormous boulders sitting alone, different from any stone around them. These are glacial erratics, rocks carried for miles or kilometers by moving ice, then abandoned like lost memories of time. Even the very soil beneath our feet, the ground we farm, is a gift from the glaciers. As they slid forward, they crushed mountains into fine mineral powder, leaving behind rich, fertile sediment. That soil, thousands of years later, became rice fields, corn plains, grasslands for cattle, and endless stretches of golden wheat. In many ways, human civilization was planted in the earth that ice left behind. Elsewhere, the ice carved long grooves into the ground, winding ridges of gravel called eskers, and rippling landforms, the remains of rivers that once flowed beneath the ancient glaciers. Walking through these lands, you can almost imagine the old ice still moving, slow and heavy, groaning softly as it passed through the valleys. Deep beneath the surface, the ice cores of Greenland and Antarctica still hold the breath of hundreds of thousands of years past. Tiny air bubbles trapped inside them are samples of ancient atmosphere, the air our ancestors once breathed while hunting mammoths. Scientists drill deep into the ice, extracting cylinders several dozen feet long, or about 10 meters, and read them as if they were the diaries of the planet. Each layer marks a year, a season, a freeze, or a thaw. And within each, there are stories, unspoken, timeless, of how Earth has changed, of its slow and steady rhythm of breath. But the legacy of ice is not only etched in the land or locked in the air, it lives within us. Our ancestors endured winters so long that the sun nearly disappeared. They learned to survive together, to share fire, food, and stories. In our DNA, remnants of those adaptations remain, the genes that help our bodies endure cold, the traces of migrations across Beringia or Doggerland. Even in myth, the memory of ice still whispers. In northern Europe, the Vikings told of Ragnarok, the day the world would freeze and then melt again. In Siberia, the Nenets people believed that the souls of mammoths slept beneath the frozen ground, and that their awakening would bring back the long winter. Across the Americas, indigenous stories speak of an ice serpent that crawled across the land, carving valleys and lakes in its wake. Though the languages differ, every story carries the same echo, a memory of the time when humankind lived beneath the shadow of snow and silence. So even though the Ice Age has passed, it never truly vanished. It hides in the dust, in the chill of morning air, in every drifting iceberg of the north. With each first snowfall of winter, it feels as if the planet itself is remembering an old chapter of its life. And if one night you stand alone in a forest, watching the snow fall in silence, know that what you feel then, that stillness and whiteness, is the memory of what the earth once was. We are only temporary guests upon a land that was once a sea of ice. And in that silence, perhaps the ice still whispers through the cold wind. I taught you how to endure. I taught you how to share. And when I left, I gave you land, water, and memory, so you would remember where you came from. In the next chapter, we will step from memory into the present, to understand that the Ice Age never truly closed, because the ice is returning through the cycles of the planet and through the changes we have begun to create ourselves. Many believe that the Ice Age ended long ago, that its frozen world exists only in books, in films, in the fading echoes of prehistory. But the truth is, we are still living in it. The ice remains. It has merely stepped back, waiting. Today's Earth, with its vast sheets of ice in the Arctic and Antarctic, still belongs to an ice age. We are simply living in an interglacial period, a brief pause between advances, a momentary spring in an eternal rhythm of cold and warmth, advance and retreat, freezing and thawing. The Milankovitch cycles, the tilt of the axis, the shape of the orbit, the slow wobble of the planet, continue to guide the heartbeat of Earth's climate as they have for millions of years. From a geological point of view, this is only a short interlude, a soft exhale before the next breath of cold. The ice has not gone. It only sleeps, waiting for the next cycle. Tens of thousands of years from now, if the orbital patterns align, if summers in the northern hemisphere grow cooler and the sun's light weakens, glaciers will once again begin their descent. From Greenland, from Siberia, from the mountains of Canada, rivers of ice will flow outward, spreading slowly like the chilled breath of the planet. But this time, there is a new variable: us. For the first time in Earth's history, a single species has the power to alter the climate of the entire world, faster than nature itself. We burn fossil fuels, releasing carbon dioxide, the same gas that ancient ice cores show once fell to its lowest levels during glacial ages. Now, its concentration is higher than at any time in the past 800,000 years. And that changes everything. Temperatures are rising. Ice is melting faster than ever before. The glaciers of Greenland and Antarctica are shrinking at a pace that, in just a century, has surpassed what once took millennia. Sea levels are climbing, repeating an ancient pattern. But this time the cause is not the cosmos. It is us. Imagine it. In Greenland, glaciers break apart into massive shards, drifting slowly out to sea. In Antarctica, cracks stretch for dozens of miles, or kilometers, widening week by week. In the Alps, caves of ice that have survived since before recorded history are vanishing within a single human lifetime. The melting of ice is not just a process, it is a warning. When the ice disappears, Earth loses its mirror. Less sunlight is reflected back to space, and more is absorbed, heating the planet even further. That heat melts more ice, a feedback loop we have seen before, now accelerating with terrifying speed. And if the ice retreats too far, Earth may lose its ability to return to cold again. The natural cycle could break. The planet might slide into a new, unfamiliar state, an ice-free Earth, for the first time in tens of millions of years. Yet one question lingers. If one day the cycles turn again, if the tilt shifts, the currents change, and the ice begins to return, will we still be ready to face it? Our ancestors survived through unity, fire, and imagination. But humanity today, surrounded by warmth and comfort, may have forgotten how to live through global cold. If fertile fields froze, If oceans sealed under ice, if winter lasted for centuries, what would we do to survive? Perhaps that question is not only scientific, but moral, a whisper from history. For ice has always come and gone, and each time it returns, it remakes everything: land, sea, life, and humankind itself. The Ice Age is not a closed chapter. It is the background rhythm of the planet, the music beneath every storm, every breeze, every drop of rain. We are merely its temporary audience, living between the low notes of frost and the high notes of warmth. And if we listen closely enough, in the wind, in the breath of the ocean, we can still hear the distant voice of the ice. I will return. But when that time comes, will humanity greet it as a survivor, or as a species that has forgotten what cold truly means? When we look back across millions of years of history, the Ice Age appears not merely as a series of climatic shifts, but as a silent teacher, one that taught life and humankind its most profound lessons. For in that brutal cold, humanity learned what no warm, comfortable civilization ever could: how to survive, how to create, and how to become truly human. The ice forced us to think beyond a single hunt, a single meal, a single day. When winters stretched endlessly, our ancestors began to look ahead, not just to tomorrow, but to the next season, the next year. It was through hardship that the very concept of time, of planning, of future was born. A fire was no longer just warmth, it was protection and connection. In its flickering glow, people told stories, taught their children how to build traps, how to read footprints, how to follow the wind. From those whispers beside the flames, language began to take shape, not merely as sound, but as the thread that bound communities together. And in that same cold, trembling hands carved the first shapes onto cave walls: mammoths, handprints, and winding lines of mystery. Those were not mere drawings, they were the birth of memory, the dawn of art, the belief that something greater than hunger and fear could exist, the spirit of humankind itself. So when we look back on the Ice Age, we do not just see an era of cold. We see the moment humanity was born. Without the ice, perhaps we would have remained scattered creatures, without language, without art, without community. It was adversity that forged our will, and suffering that tempered our mind. Yet the lesson of ice is not confined to the past. It continues even now, written in our present age. Once again, the planet is changing. Once again, we are being tested. But this time, the difference is clear. We are no longer the victims of nature's power. We are the ones altering it. Rivers are drying, coral reefs are dying, storms are growing stronger. These are the warning bells that the delicate balance of nature, the one the ice once held, is faltering under our own hands. And in the farthest corners of the earth, the ice is melting. Slab by slab, it falls into the sea, not with the slow rhythm of ancient cycles, but with the labored, gasping breath of a planet under strain. In every drop that melts, perhaps there is a final message from the Ice Age to us. I once came to test you. Now you are testing me. Looking at our world today, we begin to understand that the true legacy of the ice is not the valleys, or the lakes, or the rich soil it left behind. Its greatest legacy is adaptation. Our ancestors did not survive because they were stronger than predators. They survived because they could change. They could observe, learn, and imagine. They did not bow before the cold. They turned it into opportunity. And that is what we must remember now. In the centuries ahead, the planet may warm by just a few degrees, yet that will be enough to reshape coastlines, drown cities, and parch the lands that feed us. But if we can keep the spirit of our Ice Age ancestors, their cooperation, their creativity, their courage, then no matter how the world changes, we will endure. Because the final lesson the ice left behind was never about cold. It was about the persistence of life. Even buried beneath miles of frost or kilometers of snow, life found a way to breathe. Even beneath the howling wind and blinding storm, humanity lit its fires, told its stories, and dreamed of tomorrow. That is what separates those who vanish from those who continue the story. Perhaps the ice will return, or perhaps it never will. Perhaps the earth will grow colder or burn hotter. But what matters most is this: we have lived through the ice, and we are still here. That simple fact is proof that no matter how the world shifts, humanity can still adapt, still care, and still remember. For in the end, the Ice Age was never just a story about climate. It was a story about resilience, about wisdom, about a small flame that has burned for tens of thousands of years in the frozen night of the cosmos and has never gone out. Perhaps to truly understand the Ice Age, we must look at it not with the eyes of science, but with the heartbeat of someone listening to the past. For after all the roaring movements of glaciers, the extinctions, the migrations, the vast reshaping of the world, what remains, above all else, is silence. When the ice withdrew, Earth entered a rare moment, a backstage stillness when everything seemed to pause and breathe. No more the deep, cracking thunder of ice. No more the long hiss of wind across the frozen plains. Only damp, soft earth, bare, waiting, like a blank page ready to be written upon. After millions of years beneath frost, the planet awoke, like a being stirring from a dream. In that stillness, rain fell for the first time upon new ground. Drops struck the rock and carried with them the first seeds of life. Algae and moss spread over wet stone. Then came low shrubs and forests. Birds returned, singing on young branches. Rivers flowed through U-shaped valleys, winding across meadows like fresh arteries in the body of a world reborn. And humankind, once trembling in caves, began to build shelters, to raise villages, and to look toward the sky with a new question. If the ice is gone, who will we become? That question has never been fully answered. Because when the ice melted, humanity stepped not only out of a physical winter, but out of a winter of the mind. We learned to plant, to tame, to build, to light, and to tell stories, not merely to survive, but to live with meaning. There is something quiet yet profound in this. Every great civilization, Egypt, Mesopotamia, India, China, was born upon the lands the glaciers left behind. It was the mineral-rich soil, the meltwater rivers, the fertile plains of the Ice Age that nourished both life and thought. As if the ice, after testing humanity, offered one final gift, a world to begin again. And through the following millennia, the children of that frozen time built cities, wrote language, composed music, and flew into the sky. Yet deep within, we still carry the memory of cold. We still fear long winters. We still gather around firelight. We still listen to the wind against stone. Perhaps that is the deepest legacy of ice, not in the ground, but in the soul. For even in the warmest cities, under electric suns, we sometimes feel that ancient chill, a cold not of weather, but of memory. It is the echo of our ancestors, sitting around a fire in a storm, whispering to one another that the sun will rise again. And maybe, every time the first snow falls, when a snowflake lands softly on your palm, the planet is repeating that old promise. I have frozen, I have melted, and I will change again. But as long as you keep the flame of wisdom and kindness alive, you will continue on. So the Ice Age did not truly end with melting. It ended with awakening. The ice withdrew only when it knew that the small, fragile creature it had taught to endure was ready to write the next chapter of Earth. Now, each night, as the world grows quiet and the wind moves gently past your window, listen closely. You may still hear the faint echo of ancient ice, not as a chill, but as a lullaby of the cosmos, reminding us that all things move in circles, and within every cycle of freezing and thawing, life continues to breathe. The ice is gone, but time remains. And within that time, humanity still walks, softly as breath in the night, the children of the Ice Age, continuing the long journey of life. Tonight, if you step outside and look up, the faint moonlight may shimmer across the mist, over rooftops, across the still surface of water. That light is quiet, thin as breath, the same light that once gleamed upon ancient glaciers, slid over white mountain peaks, and glimmered in the eyes of mammoths walking through the cold wind. The moon is still there. It has seen everything. The Ice Age may have passed, but the moon has never left this planet. It has watched the winters come and go, watched the first humans kindle fire in caves, and later, light whole cities with electricity. From its distant perch, it has seen Earth change color, from white to green to gold. And perhaps it still wonders, do humans remember the ice? When you take a deep breath, the air entering your lungs once belonged to the Ice Age. Those molecules of oxygen were once trapped in glaciers for tens of thousands of years, then released as the ice melted. They once flowed through the lungs of great beasts, through the flames of ancient hunters, through the cold winds of the steppe. Now, they touch your lungs. The ice has never truly vanished. It only changed form, slipping quietly into life itself and into you. If you listen even more closely, you might feel something very small, a rhythm, slow and steady, like the distant breathing of the planet. That is the echo of the Ice Age. No longer the sound of cracking or howling winds, but a gentle resonance, the sound of continuity. Perhaps the true purpose of ice was never to test us, but to remind us that all things are temporary. That cold, too, will pass. And with every thaw, life returns, subtler, stronger, and gentler. For ice does not destroy, it only slows the world down, giving it time to reflect, to listen, to be reborn. So whenever life becomes loud and chaotic, you can remember that image. The great silent wall of ice, stretching beyond the horizon. Not as something to fear, but as something to learn from. Because sometimes, only in silence do we hear our truest voice. And when you close your eyes, imagine this. A white plain unfolds before you, endless. The sky is dim, the wind soft. Far away, the moonlight falls upon the ice, forming a pale, glowing path. On that path, you see the shadows of vanished beings, mammoths, saber-toothed cats, ancient hunters, all walking slowly, not toward the past, not into the future, but through an eternal present. A present where ice, wind, and life blend together. No borders, no time, only breath. Sleep, the earth whispers. Tonight I become once more the gentle land of ice I have always been. Rest within my quiet cold, for when the sun rises you shall live again, and remember this dream. And so in the darkness the ice drifts softly through your memory, like an ancient mist enfolding you, singing you to sleep. The sleep of the planet, the sleep of life, the sleep of you. Before the darkness closes completely, stay a little longer, in this space between dream and waking, where every sound has melted into mist upon the surface of a quiet lake. For there is still one thing the ice wishes to say, before it sinks back into the eternal sleep of time. Perhaps the Ice Age was never only an age of cold. It was a time of understanding, between the earth and the beings who walked upon its back. In every frozen wind, the planet whispered to us, "You cannot conquer me, but I do not wish to destroy you. I only wish you to understand. To live is to live together, not against." Our ancestors understood this without needing words. They knew that to survive, one must share the fire. That to endure, one must walk side by side through the snow. They knew that a glacier may be cold, but two hands clasped together can still be warm. And from that warmth came the foundations of humanity: compassion, wisdom, and memory. Now when we look back, we see that the ice left behind more than rivers and valleys. It left an invisible inheritance, humility. It taught us that within nature, humankind is not the ruler, but a guest, a traveler passing through time. And that to outlast the seasons of ice, we must live lightly, gratefully, and listen to the breathing of the earth. Imagine, millions of years from now, when we are gone, when forests reclaim the forgotten cities, when rain washes the last traces of glass and steel away, the ice may return. It will glide over our ruins, quiet as night, touching every stone, every fragment of bone, every remnant of humankind, and whisper, not in words, but in wind, "I remember you. Thank you for telling my story." And then, as always, the ice will retreat again, making room for the next age of life. Everything repeats, but never the same. For each cycle, long or brief, carries a new layer of memory, like fresh snow resting gently upon the old, making it deeper, softer, more serene. Perhaps by then, Earth will once again look up at the moon, still hanging, unchanged, casting pale light upon the thick ice below. Cold winds will sing again, as they have for millions of years. And somewhere, a new creature, not human, will pause, listen, and feel its heart slow to the rhythm of the planet. It will not know that those memories once belonged to us, but it will feel them just as we do now. And perhaps then, the Ice Age will no longer be the name of an era, but a state of soul, where silence and gratitude meet. Hold on to this feeling a little longer, the faint chill, the distant wind, the slow, steady breath. That is the Ice Age within you, no longer a season of snow, but a season of stillness, of awareness, of life felt deeply. And now, as the story truly closes, let the images fade. The mammoths, the hunters, the drifting ice, the dim moonlight, all dissolving into night. Only a soft warmth remains in your chest, and a quiet voice, far away, gently saying, "You have listened, and I have been remembered." The ice smiles. Time falls asleep, and your dream begins, within the last breath of the Ice Age. When all words have been spoken, when every image has faded like smoke, only silence remains. A long, gentle silence in which you can hear the earth breathing. Not hurried, not strong, not weak, just an ancient rhythm, slow and enduring. It is the same breath that once flowed beneath glaciers kilometers thick, that drifted beneath frozen rivers and rose again through thin rain. It has outlasted every creature, every civilization. And tonight, it moves quietly through your chest, a breath connecting the past and the present. People often think that ice and life are opposites, one still, the other in motion. But in truth, they are two sides of the same thing. Ice remembers, water dreams, and life is where the two meet. If you close your eyes, you might see the earth as a sleeping being. Outside, all is quiet, but inside, billions of streams still flow, thousands of creatures still breathe, and somewhere deep beneath the soil, the ice is still dreaming. It dreams of the beginning, when the planet was young, when the air was so pure that every drop of dew shone like crystal. It dreams of the great beasts that once roamed, of the first humans who lit fire, and of you, sitting here, listening to its story. And then, within that dream, the ice whispers softly, "I am not only cold, I am the memory of the world. When I melt, what I hold inside is released, as every drop of water tells the journey of a cloud. Each tiny drop flows toward the ocean. Each wisp of vapor rises to become rain, and every time a snowflake falls, it is a fragment of memory returning to visit the earth. Tomorrow, when you awaken and hear the rain outside your window, you may think of the Ice Age. Know that in each drop there is an ancient molecule, one that once touched eternal ice, that once reflected the silver moon of prehistory. And now it touches your skin, quietly, gently, like a lullaby from the planet to its children. Sleep, it says. The ice has gone far, but I remain. When you are weary, remember, I have slept longer than you can imagine, and each time I awaken, I find spring again. Let the story dissolve like the last snow of the season. Let every image settle back into breath. You do not need to remember everything, only this feeling, the feeling of deep stillness, where ice, water, and life become one. This is the final gift of the Ice Age, a wordless lullaby for you, for the earth, and for all that still breathes in the gentle darkness of the universe.